The bubbles from the dish soap clung to my weathered hands. I scrubbed Loretta's favorite coffee mug for what felt like the 100th time this month, even though I'd only used it this morning. It was a foolish habit, but it was mine. It was the same routine every evening. I'd washed the single plate, the single fork, the single cup that served as the silent monument to another solitary dinner. Each clink of ceramic against the rack echoed in the cavernous silence of a kitchen that was once filled with life. It used to be filled with Loretta's gospel humming and her gentle scolding about the mail I left scattered across the table. I dried the mug with the careful precision of a museum curator handling a priceless artifact. I placed it in its designated spot on the dish rack, a shrine to better times. The refrigerator hummed its lonely tune behind me, its door a chaotic mosaic of faded photos and mismatched magnets. A picture of Rachel at her high school graduation always caught my eye. She was 17, grinning from ear to ear in her cap and gown with Loretta's arm wrapped proudly around her shoulders. That was before the argument started, before money became a weapon, before the silence became a wall between us. The shrill, piercing ring of the wall-mounted phone cut through my thoughts like a surgeon's scalpel. My wet hands fumbled for the dish towel. The phone continued its insistent, demanding shriek. I grabbed the cold receiver, the plastic unfamiliar in my palm after so long. Squinting through my reading glasses, I peered at the caller ID. The name made my breath catch in my throat. Rachel. For a full second, I couldn't move, couldn't think. A year of unspoken words stretched between us, a vast and desolate ocean. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from, or what time it is for you. The last time we had spoken, it ended with her storming out of this very kitchen. She'd demanded money for some cunt misinvestment opportunity, and I'd refused. Loretta would have handled it better. She always knew the right words to say, the right tone to use. I cleared my throat, my own voice, a stranger to my ears. "Hello?" I said. The word came out like gravel. Rachel's voice was hesitant, uncertain. It was the same tone she used as a girl when she'd broken a vase and was trying to gauge how much trouble she was in. It's me." My knuckles were white as I gripped the phone. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Rachel, I wasn't expecting." "I know," she cut in quickly. "I know it's been—" She paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath on the other end of the line. "Too long, way too long." I moved slowly toward my armchair, the one Loretta had insisted we buy because it supported my back just right. The cushions were worn smooth from years of evening news broadcasts and Sunday crosswords. "How are you, baby girl?" "I'm good. I'm really good," she said, the words slightly too fast. "Marcus and we've been talking. We realized how much we missed having you around, how much we miss family." The word hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. Family. It was something we had been once, but pride and money and stubborn silence had built walls so high, I thought they'd never come down. "I miss it, too," I admitted, surprised by the raw honesty in my own voice. "Mom, would you consider coming for dinner tonight?" she asked. The question rushed out. "Marcus is making that Sunday fried chicken and greens you always loved. We could talk, really talk like we used to." I stared at the family photo on the side table. Rachel, Marcus, Loretta, and me, at their wedding 5 years ago, before everything went so wrong. Loretta always said, families find their way back to each other, given enough time. Tonight, my voice betrayed my surprise. "I know it's short notice," she said quickly, "but Marcus already started cooking, and we don't want to wait anymore. We've wasted enough time." Something in her voice tugged at a memory deep inside me, a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years, not since she was a small girl, afraid of thunderstorms and hiding under the blankets. Maybe Loretta had been right all along. Maybe families really could heal. "What time?" I heard myself say. 7:30. "I'll text you the address. We moved to Scottsdale last year." Scottsdale? That was expensive territory. Rachel had always been ambitious. "I'll be there, Mom." Her voice softened, filled with a relief that sounded genuine. Thank you for giving us another chance." After I hung up, I sat in the gathering dusk, the family photo trembling in my hands. Loretta smiled up at me from the frame, and for a moment I could almost hear her whisper, "It's time, Barbara. It's time to come home." The silence that followed the call felt different, charged with a fragile possibility instead of the usual crushing emptiness. I set the photo carefully back on the table and rose from my chair with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Tonight would be different. Tonight, I was going to get my daughter back. Upstairs, my bedroom felt like a museum of memories. Loretta's perfume bottles still lined her dresser, dust motes dancing in the late afternoon light that streamed through the lace curtains. I opened my closet and pushed past the everyday blouses and worn cardigans until my fingers found the navy dress hanging in a protective garment bag. The fabric felt substantial between my fingers. Loretta had insisted on it when she surprised me with it for Rachel's graduation. "You need something nice for important occasions," she'd said, smoothing the fabric with her careful hands. "And our daughter graduating is definitely important." I carried the dress to the bed and unwrapped it slowly. I remembered the fierce pride I'd felt walking into that auditorium. Loretta on my arm, watching Rachel cross the stage to accept her diploma. That same dress had seen me through anniversaries, church services, and eventually Loretta's funeral. Tonight it would witness another milestone, a resurrection. The shower's hot water loosened muscles I didn't even realize had been tensed for a year. As I applied my makeup, I studied my reflection. When had I gotten so old? The lines around my eyes had deepened into canyons, and silver now dominated the hair at my temples. Would Rachel see the toll her absence had taken? Would Marcus see how lonely I'd become? Dressed and ready, I selected a bottle of good cognac from the cabinet, a peace offering. Just as I was about to head downstairs, my phone buzzed with Rachel's text. 1847 Desert Vista Drive, Scottsdale. "Can't wait to see you, Mom." I called for an Uber, my fingers hesitating for a moment as I typed in the address. Scottsdale was a world away from my modest Southside Chicago neighborhood. Standing by my front window, I watched the familiar brownstones blur into the evening shadows. Mr. Patterson from next door waved from his stoop and I waved back, feeling a lightness in my chest I hadn't experienced in months. Maybe tonight would change everything. The Uber arrived precisely on time, a clean sedan with a driver who offered a friendly comment on the nice weather. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched my world transform outside the window. Chicago's familiar, working-class landscape gave way to highways, which in turn bled into the desert suburbs. The houses grew larger, their desert landscaping more pristine. By the time we crossed into Scottsdale, I was staring at mansions that could have housed 6 families like mine. These weren't homes, they were statements. "Scottsdale's a beautiful area," the driver remarked, noticing my wide-eyed stare. "Lot of successful folks out here." "I'm visiting my daughter," I replied, a swell of pride in my chest. It felt good to say it out loud. "She and her husband just moved out here." "Lucky woman having family in a place like this," he said. "Lucky indeed," I thought, though a sliver of unease began to creep into my excitement. How had Rachel managed this? The last I knew, her investment opportunities were bleeding her dry. A year ago, she couldn't make rent. Now, she lived in one of Arizona's most expensive zip codes. The Uber slowed to a stop in front of a house that looked like it had been ripped from the pages of an architectural magazine. I sat frozen in the back seat, staring at stone columns and perfectly sculpted desert plants that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. A circular driveway curved around an ornate fountain, its waters dancing in the early evening light. 2 luxury cars, a Mercedes and a BMW, were parked like gleaming trophies of success. "This is it, ma'am," the driver announced cheerfully. "Beautiful place." I fumbled with my purse, my hands trembling slightly as I paid him, adding a generous tip. The car door felt heavy as I stepped onto the pristine pavement. My shoes, polished but obviously worn, clicked against the stone path leading to an entrance that could have belonged to a small hotel. Perfectly trimmed desert vegetation lined the walkway and motion sensor lights illuminated my approach with theatrical precision. Before my hand could even reach for the brass doorbell, the massive oak door swung open. A middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes stood in the doorway wearing a crisp polo shirt that identified him as professional staff. His smile seemed genuine, but I saw something flicker in his eyes for a split second. It looked like concern, or maybe a warning. It vanished so quickly I wondered if I'd imagined it. "Mrs. Thompson," he said warmly, stepping aside to usher me in. "I'm Carlos. Miss Rachel and Mr. Marcus are so excited you're here." The foyer was breathtaking. Marble floors stretched toward a grand curved staircase that belonged in a movie. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow on what looked like original artwork. The air was filled with the subtle scent of fresh flowers. "Mom," Rachel's voice boomed from deeper within the house. She appeared in the foyer looking less like my daughter and more like a model from a fashion magazine. Expensive dress, perfect hair, teeth that were definitely whiter than they'd been at her graduation. She reached me and pulled me into an embrace that felt desperate, lasting a beat too long. "You look great," she said, stepping back to study me with eyes that seemed both grateful and anxious. "Really great." Marcus materialized beside her like a graceful apparition in an expensive suit. His grooming was flawless, his watch subtle but clearly expensive. "Barbara," he swept forward to kiss my cheek, his cologne expensive and overwhelming. "You look wonderful. We're so happy you're here." "This place is incredible," I managed, still trying to process the sheer opulence. "How did you—" "Real estate," Rachel interrupted, her laugh, a little too loud, a little too bright, caught the market at exactly the right time. Lucky timing, mostly. Something about her tone felt off, but Marcus was already taking my arm with practiced grace. "Come, let's get you settled. Carlos, could you take Mrs. Thompson's coat?" I handed over my jacket, my best one, which suddenly felt shabby and worn. Carlos accepted it with another of those kind but troubled smiles, before disappearing. "I brought this," I said, offering the bottle of cognac. "Thought we could share a drink." Rachel's face lit up as she examined the label. "Mom, this is fantastic. You shouldn't have, but I'm glad you did." She squeezed my shoulder with an enthusiasm that felt slightly forced. "Marcus has been cooking all afternoon. He remembered how much you love fried chicken and greens." How did he remember? We'd shared maybe 3 meals together in 5 years, and I couldn't recall Sunday dinner ever being a topic of conversation. But his smile was so warm, so welcoming that I pushed the thought aside. "Family takes care of family," he replied smoothly, linking his arm through mine. "That's what matters most." Rachel led us into a dining room straight out of a lifestyle magazine. A massive table was set for 3 with gleaming china and silver. Multiple forks and knives were arranged with military precision beside each plate. "Only the best for family reunions, right, Mom?" Rachel beamed as she pulled out the chair at the head of the table for me. Marcus settled gracefully to my left, while Rachel took the seat to my right. The arrangement felt deliberate, positioning them to flank me, to guide the conversation. "Let's start with your cognac," Rachel announced, already opening the bottle I'd brought. The amber liquid caught the light as she poured generous portions into heavy crystal sniff. She filled my glass higher than I would have poured for myself. "To family," Marcus said, raising his glass. "To forgiveness and fresh starts." "To Loretta," Rachel added, her voice catching slightly. "She would have wanted us together like this." The cognac burned sweetly as we drank. Almost immediately, a pleasant warmth spread through my chest, more potent than I expected. The conversation started east. They asked about the restaurants, and I found myself speaking more freely than I had in years. 7 locations now, Rachel said, a note of admiration in her voice. That's impressive by any standard. She'd been keeping track even during our silence. A warmth expanded in my chest. Maybe she had cared more than I'd realized. She refilled my glass before I even noticed it was empty. Carlos served a rich lobster bisque. I noticed his hands trembled slightly as he placed the bowl in front of me. "Do you ever think about retirement, Barb?" Marcus asked casually, slowing down a bit. "The restaurants keep me busy," I said, taking another sip of cognac. The room felt warm, comfortable. It's what Loretta and I built together. Every location has her fingerprints on it. Rachel and Marcus exchanged a glance I pretended not to see. "But you can't work forever," Rachel pressed gently. "Have you thought about succession planning, legal arrangements for the future?" The question felt oddly specific, but the alcohol made everything seem harmless. A simple inquiry from a concerned daughter. The main course arrived. Fried chicken and collard greens that smelled exactly like Loretta's recipe. As we ate, Rachel told vague stories about her real estate ventures, while Marcus asked surprisingly detailed questions about my profit margins and property values. My head felt lighter than it should have after just 2 glasses. I was in the middle of a story about the opening of my newest restaurant in Hyde Park, feeling the pleasant buzz of the cognac and the warmth of what felt like a real family dinner. Loretta would have been so proud, I was saying, reaching into my purse for my phone to show them a picture. Just as my fingers closed around it, the phone vibrated against my palm. The vibration startled me mid-sentence. "Sorry," I mumbled, glancing at the screen. "Everything all right?" Rachel asked, leaning forward with an excessive amount of concern. "Just an unfamiliar number," I said, shielding the screen with my hand out of pure instinct. The number was local, but the digits were completely foreign. It wasn't one of my managers. Then I saw the message. It appeared in stark, urgent capital letters. "Stand up and leave, now. Say nothing to your daughter. My blood turned to ice. The elegant dining room suddenly felt like it was tilting, the crystal and silver blurring at the edges. I blinked, certain I'd misread it, that the cognac was playing tricks on my eyes. I read it again. The words were the same, unchanged, unforgiving. Mom. Marcus's voice seemed to come from a great distance. You look pale. Are you feeling all right? I forced my features into what I hoped was a normal expression, slipping the phone back into my purse with a hand that trembled. Fine. Just rich food hitting me harder than I expected. But I wasn't fine. Someone knew where I was. Someone felt I was in danger. Danger from my own daughter. The cognac glass in my hand felt slick. When had I become so dizzy? 2 glasses shouldn't affect me this strongly, not with a full meal. You sure you're okay? Rachel studied my face with sharp attention. You went completely white there for a second. I'm sure, I lied. I just need to. Excuse me for a moment. The bathroom. Rachel pointed toward the hallway. Second door on the left. We'll wait for you. Carlos is bringing dessert. I stood carefully, testing my balance. The room swayed slightly, but I managed to walk in a straight line toward the hallway. The anonymous message burned in my mind. Second door on the left. But my feet didn't turn left. An instinct I couldn't explain, a cold dread coiling in my gut, pulled me straight ahead toward a door that was slightly ajar at the end of the hall. The door led to Rachel's home office. It was dark, save for the faint glow of a computer monitor. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a drum of warning. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of leather and my daughter's expensive perfume. On the large mahogany desk sat a leather briefcase, its clasps undone. My eyes, adjusting to the dim light, were drawn to a stack of papers peeking out from inside. The letterhead was instantly recognizable. It was from my company, my restaurants, my life's work. My hands shook as I reached for the documents. The words swam before my eyes, the cognac making it hard to focus, but the meaning was brutally clear. Power of attorney, transfer of assets. My breath hitched. It was all there. A thick stack of legal documents prepared in advance. A complete and total transfer of every property, every business asset, every penny Loretta and I had ever earned. The only thing missing was the most important element, my signature. The pen lay right beside the papers, waiting. The reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. The dizziness, the cognac, the fried chicken, the questions about succession planning. It was all a carefully orchestrated trap. My daughter was trying to drug me and steal everything from me. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to open the camera app. I needed proof. I needed a picture of these documents. Just as the screen lit up, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were moving quickly toward the office. Panic seized me. There was no time. I shoved the papers haphazardly back into the briefcase, my only thought to get out of sight. My eyes darted around the room and found another door, a smaller one partially hidden behind a bookshelf, a side exit to the hall. I slipped through it just as the main office door swung open. I flattened myself against the wall in the darkened hallway, holding my breath. I could see Rachel's silhouette in the doorway. She flicked on the desk lamp. Where did I put it? She muttered to herself, her voice tight with frustration. She rummaged through the briefcase, the sound of rustling paper echoing in the silent house. I didn't wait to see what she was looking for. I moved silently, my heels making no sound on the thick runner. I had the knowledge, the terrible soul-crushing truth, but the proof was back in that office, in my daughter's hands. I was weaponless, armed only with a truth so monstrous no one would ever believe it. My only thought was to escape. I walked quickly, not toward the grand foyer, but in the opposite direction, toward the back of the house, where I guessed the kitchen was. The scent of coffee and chicken grease confirmed it. I pushed through a swinging door and found myself in a kitchen that was larger than my entire first floor. Carlos stood at an enormous sink, his back to me, washing crystal glasses with methodical precision. My footsteps must have been audible on the marble floor, but he didn't turn. He didn't acknowledge my presence in any way, as if I were a ghost. The kitchen's back door stood just beyond him, a dark rectangle promising freedom and fresh air, a space to think, away from the watchful, predatory eyes of my daughter and her husband. I moved quietly past Carlos, expecting him to turn, to call out, to alert them. He never looked up, but I saw his shoulders tense as I passed. It wasn't ignorance, it was permission. The door opened silently onto a manicured lawn. Motion sensors lit my path across the perfectly trimmed desert grass. toward a gate in the property's back fence. My phone felt heavy in my purse. Its mysterious warning now a confirmed prophecy of betrayal. I broke into a stumbling run, my heels slipping on the grass. The gate opened onto a quiet residential street lined with silent, imposing mansions. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling so badly it took 3 attempts to open the ride-sharing app. I requested a pickup 1 block away, a safe distance from Rachel's house. 5 minutes until arrival. 5 minutes to process the wreckage of my family. The Uber's headlights appeared at the end of the block like a lifeline. I climbed into the back seat, gave the driver my Chicago address, and then with a deep breath dialed the number that had sent the warning. It rang twice before a voice answered. It was the houseman, Carlos. "I hoped you would call this number," he said, his voice careful and deliberately neutral. "Who is this? Why did you warn me?" My voice was rough, ragged. "I cannot reveal myself," he said, and I realized he didn't know I recognized his voice. "But you were in danger tonight." Danger. I saw the papers, the power of attorney. She was trying to rob me. There was a pause. "It is worse than that, Signora. Your daughter, she owes a great deal of money. $2.3 million to people who break bones when a payment is late." The Uber driver glanced at me in his rearview mirror. "That's impossible," I breathed. "She has this house, the cars. She borrowed against everything to fund gambling debts," he said, his voice flat, reciting facts. "Underground casinos, high-stakes poker. The house is a facade. The loan sharks gave her 2 weeks to pay. That deadline is in 11 days. Her words painted a desperate picture, but in his calculated telling, he omitted the most crucial detail. He didn't mention the drug. He didn't mention the poison. He feared, perhaps rightly, that a truth so monstrous would sound like a delusion, that it would scare me into paralysis instead of action. "They were going to pressure you," he continued, his voice gaining urgency. "I heard them talking. Those men were here earlier. They told Miss Rachel they wanted their money, and they didn't care how she got it. The papers, they were going to get you to sign them tonight to cover her debt." His partial truth landed exactly as he intended. The cold dread of betrayal was replaced by a surge of misguided maternal instinct. The dizziness I felt, I rationalized it away, as shock, as stress. My daughter wasn't a monster trying to poison me. She was a desperate woman cornered by criminals making a terrible choice to save her own life. The narrative shifted in my head. Rachel was no longer the villain. She was a victim, and I was her mother. My job was to protect her. I looked out the window. The expensive Scottsdale neighborhoods blurred past, their perfect lawns hiding imperfect secrets. This wasn't over. I couldn't just run back to Chicago and leave my daughter to be torn apart by loan sharks. I leaned forward. "Driver," the man glanced in the mirror again. "Yeah, turn around. We're going back." He hesitated. "You sure about that? You seemed pretty keen on leaving a minute ago." My resolve hardened. My new plan was simple. Confront Rachel, get her to confess everything about the debt, and then we would go to the police together. I would save her from herself, from the consequences of her own terrible choices. It was what Loretta would have wanted. "My daughter is in trouble," I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "I'm going to get her out." The return journey felt completely different. The streetlights no longer illuminated a path of escape, but a path of confrontation. Each mile brought me closer to the daughter I had raised, the family I had trusted, the mess I now felt obligated to clean up. Walking up the curved driveway a second time felt like approaching a gallows. The mansion's perfect exterior seemed like a lie, concealing a desperate, rotten core. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorbell. This time, I knew what I was walking into. Or so I thought. The chimes echoed through the house. Footsteps approached quickly, urgently. Rachel yanked the door open, her face a mask of warring relief and suspicion. "Mom, where have you been?" Her smile was painted on, brittle and thin. "We were getting worried sick." "Sorry, baby girl." I forced an apologetic tone. "I just needed some fresh air." Felt dizzy after all that rich food. Dizzy. Her eyes sharpened. "You were gone for almost half an hour. Marcus thought something terrible had happened." Marcus appeared behind her, his expensive suit wrinkled from what looked like nervous pacing. His perfect host mask slipped for a second, revealing the raw panic underneath before he composed himself. "Barbara, you gave us such a scare," he said, reaching for my arm with fingers that trembled slightly. "Are you feeling better now?" "Much better, thank you," I said, allowing him to guide me back inside. His grip was too tight, just needed to clear my head. "Perhaps you had too much cognac with dinner." he suggested, his laugh sounding like shattering glass. Actually, I think I'd like to sit down again, I said, moving deliberately back toward the dining room, if that's all right. Rachel and Marcus exchanged a look, a flash of communication I was meant to miss. They were improvising, their well-rehearsed plan having gone off the rails. Of course, Mom, Rachel said, whatever you need. The dining room had been hastily reorganized, the crystal glasses had been cleared, but the atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension. I settled back into my chair at the head of the table, and they flanked me, just as they had before. So, Mom, Rachel began, drumming her fingers on the table, feeling completely recovered, no more dizziness or confusion. The question was loaded. She was checking to see if I remembered anything. Clear as a bell, baby girl, I replied evenly. That fresh air worked wonders. A new resolve hardened in Rachel's eyes. She clearly believed she had a second chance to see her plan through. She stood suddenly and moved to the liquor cabinet. Mom, let's have one more toast before the evening ends. Her hands trembled almost imperceptibly as she poured cognac into 2 fresh crystals. I watched her. I saw her back was turned to me and Marcus. I saw her reach into her pocket. I saw her sprinkle a fine white powder into one of the glasses. It was a larger amount this time, a desperate, reckless dose. In that moment, Carlos's carefully constructed lie crumbled into dust. The false lead evaporated, replaced by a horrifying, undeniable truth. This wasn't a desperate attempt to secure a loan. This wasn't about pressure. This was cold, calculated, and malicious. She was trying to poison her own mother. She turned around, the 2 glasses in her hands, a charming smile fixed on her face. The glass intended for me was cloudy, the amber liquid swirling with a fine sediment that caught the light. The other was crystal clear. The depth of her betrayal was absolute, and my misguided attempt to save her had just walked me right back into the trap. Rachel set my glass down in front of me, the poisoned one, ensuring I could see the generous portion she'd poured. A toast, she said, her voice overly bright. 2 second chances. I had to buy time. The police I had called from the Uber on the way back were on their way, but they weren't here yet. My mind raced. I needed to stall. I began casually, not touching the glass. I want to tell you about the day you were born, Rachel. Her shoulders tensed. Yeah, Mom, that's sweet, but maybe we should toast first. This cognac is too good to let it get warm. This is important, baby girl, I said, settling back in my chair, folding my hands peacefully on the table. Your mama was in labor for 14 hours, longest day of my life. Barbara, the cognac will lose its flavor, Marcus urged, his smile growing strained. Can't we drink and listen at the same time? Patience, dear, I said, my eyes fixed on Rachel's. Some stories can't be rushed. I lifted my glass as if to examine the cognac's color, swirling the contents gently. The foreign particles danced in the amber liquid like a snow globe of death. Loretta was convinced something was wrong because the labor was taking so long, but she always had instincts about these things. She always knew when something wasn't quite right. Rachel's eye began to twitch. Mom, you've been talking for 10 minutes. The cognac really is getting warm. Time flies when you're sharing memories, I said, gesturing expansively with my glass, carefully avoiding drinking from it. Marcus stood abruptly and moved behind my chair, his hands settling on my shoulders. Barbara, you're such a wonderful storyteller, he cooed, his fingers pressing down with increasing insistence. Why don't we toast to Rachel's birth? Then you can continue. I could feel his desperation through his touch. The plan was falling apart, and they knew it. The thing about stubbornness, I mused, still holding my untouched glass, is that it can be a virtue or a vice. Loretta always worried about which way you'd choose. The room fell silent. Rachel and Marcus stared at me, their frustration boiling over. I think, I said slowly, Loretta would be heartbroken to see what choices you've made. Rachel's face went white. What do you mean by that? Before I could answer, 3 sharp authoritative knocks echoed from the front door. A voice amplified and unmistakable boomed through the house. Police, opened the door. Rachel's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The color drained from her face, leaving it the color of old parchment. Marcus let out a small, strangled gasp, and took a step back from my chair, his hands flying to his mouth. The perfectly constructed illusion of their lives shattered in an instant. The dining room was plunged into a stunned silence, broken only by the sound of the front door being forced open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the foyer, growing closer. 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a rumpled suit appeared in the doorway. their expressions grim and professional. "Are you Rachel Thompson?" the detective asked, his eyes scanning the scene, the shattered glass, the panicked faces, the untouched cognac in my hand. Rachel seemed unable to speak, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The detective's gaze settled on her. "I think you'd better come with us." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed in the silent dining room like a judge's gavel. A senior officer stepped forward. "Rachel Thompson, you're under arrest for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse. This is insane." Rachel's voice cracked. "This is a misunderstanding. My mother is confused. Tell him this is all some terrible mistake," Marcus shrieked. I stood slowly, the poisoned cognac still in my hand. The sediment swirled, a testament to their guilt. "There's no mistake," I said, my voice steady. I held the glass out to the detective. "This glass contains a drug. My daughter added it to make me sign business transfer documents." A junior officer carefully took the glass with a gloved hand, holding it up to the chandelier light. The foreign particles were clearly visible. "Attempted poisoning carries an 8 to 12-year minimum sentence," the senior officer informed Rachel as the handcuffs were secured. Rachel's knees buckled. 12 years, but the loan sharks. "They'll kill me if I don't pay in 11 days. "Rachel, shut up," Marcus hissed. But it was too late. "You had choices," I said quietly. "You chose gambling over family. You chose crime over honest work, and you chose to poison your own mother rather than face the consequences of your actions." The junior officer turned to Marcus. "Marcus Williams, you're also under arrest as a co-conspirator." "No." He clawed at the table. "I didn't plan anything. Rachel forced me. I'm a victim, too." As they were led away, Rachel turned back one last time. "Mom, how could you do this to your own family?" "Mama would be heartbroken." "Your mama valued honesty above everything," I answered firmly. "She would never forgive what you tried to do tonight." At the Scottsdale police station, the reality of the night's events began to sink in. I sat with Detective Martinez, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, giving my formal statement. Through a reinforced glass window, I could see Rachel and Marcus being processed in separate rooms. "Mrs. Thompson," Martinez said, setting down a cup of lukewarm coffee. "Walk me through this again. When you went back to the house, you knew she was going to try again." "I didn't know about the poison then," I explained. "The anonymous tip I received was incomplete. I thought it was just about financial pressure, that she was being threatened by loan sharks. I went back to try and help her." "And that's when you saw her put the powder in the glass?" "Yes, with my own eyes. She thought I was still dizzy, that I wouldn't notice." Martinez nodded slowly, making a note. "My officers are executing a search warrant at the residence now. You mentioned seeing legal documents in her office earlier. A full power of attorney and a complete transfer of all business assets." I confirmed. "They were in a briefcase on her desk. She almost caught me with them." Just then, Martinez's phone buzzed. She listened for a moment, her expression hardening. "Understood." She hung up and looked at me. "My team just found them. A full set of documents, just as you described, hidden in a floor safe in the office closet. Your daughter's fingerprints are all over them." The lost advantage was regained. The final piece of the puzzle, clicking into place. The hours crawled by. From the interview room, I could hear Marcus's frantic voice echoing down the hall. It was all Rachel's fault. He wailed to the officers. "I just went along because I was scared." Detective Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Fear doesn't typically excuse conspiracy, sir." She turned back to me. "With the documents, the confession about the loan sharks, and the physical evidence from the glass, the case is airtight. Rachel's looking at 15 to 20 years. Marcus might get less if he cooperates, but he's still facing serious time." The numbers felt unreal. My daughter, my only child, would spend her 40s and 50s in a prison cell. Later, as an officer was preparing to escort me out, I saw Rachel through the holding cell window. She was slumped on a narrow bench, her head in her hands. She looked up and saw me, her eyes lighting up with a desperate, familiar hope. "Mom," she shouted, her voice echoing through the station. "Please, I'll pay it all back. I'll go to treatment. I'll change." It was the same promise she'd made a year ago, the same manipulation. I looked at her, not with hatred, but with a profound and bottomless sadness. I just shook my head slowly and turned away. In the station lobby, as an officer waited to drive me back to Chicago, I pulled out my phone. I stared at the number that had saved my life. "Actually," I told the officer, "I need to make one call first." I dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. This is Carlos Rivera. His voice was no longer disguised, but warm with genuine concern. Carlos, I said, relief flooding through me. It's Barbara Thompson. You were right there the whole time. You saw everything and still found the courage to save me. I couldn't let them hurt you, he said simply. You treated me with kindness. You looked at me when you spoke to me. They treated me like furniture. Sitting in that sterile police station lobby, I started to cry for the first time since Loretta's funeral, not from pain, but from overwhelming gratitude for this man's quiet, powerful moral courage. How did you know everything? I asked. The details about the documents. 3 days ago, I was cleaning Miss Rachel's office when I heard them planning, he explained. They spoke as if I wasn't human, like I couldn't understand English. They discussed the drug, how much to use, where to hide the papers. Mrs. Marcus researched your favorite foods, your routines, everything. You risked everything to warn a stranger. Not a stranger, he said softly. A good woman who reminded me of my own mother. An idea clear and certain formed in my mind. Carlos, I need to ask you something. Do you have another job lined up? No, ma'am. After tonight, I doubt I'll get good references from the Thompsons. I own 7 restaurants, I said. I need a manager for my newest location. Someone I can trust completely. Someone with your character and judgment. The job is yours if you want it. There was a silence on the other end of the line, then the sound of a choked sob. Mrs. Thompson, you don't have to do that. This isn't charity, I said firmly. I need people who do the right thing when no one's watching. You proved tonight that you're exactly that person. The job is yours if you want it. The ride back to Chicago passed in comfortable silence. The familiar streets welcomed me home. Inside my modest house, the photos still covered the refrigerator door. Rachel as a girl, Marcus at their wedding, Loretta smiling from a time before the world turned sour. I carefully took down Rachel's photo. I didn't tear it up. I placed it in a kitchen drawer. Some memories deserve to be preserved, but not displayed. Marcus's wedding picture followed it into the darkness. Loretta's photo remained, her smile seeming to approve of the night's hard choices. On the wall calendar in the space for next Monday, I wrote, Carlos, 10 a.m. Hyde Park. Below that, I wrote, New Beginning. My phone buzzed with a final text from Detective Martinez. Both suspects formally charged. Trial scheduled for August. Your testimony will be crucial. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, a profound exhaustion settling over me. But for the first time in a year, I knew I would sleep peacefully. In my bedroom. Loretta's perfume still sat on the dresser, a silent reminder that love sometimes means protecting people from harm, even when that harm comes from your own family, especially when it comes from family. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say, you were here.